For more on this, former Chief of Staff to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, George Birnbaum, joins us live from Indonesia's capital, Jakarta. George, thank you so much for joining us on WION during these critical days, which seem to be days that are leading up to a ground offensive on the part of Israeli forces. What are the main challenges that Israeli forces will likely confront with this ground offensive? And is there a plan for what happens next?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, the challenges are not new to anyone who's fought urban warfare, door-to-door fighting, underground fighting, a network of tunnels, an enemy that knows the territory better than yourself. These are very difficult obstacles to overcome. However, the Israeli army spends a lot of time analyzing, preparing for such actions, and I have no doubt that the Israeli army will perform admirably, and whilst all the time doing its best to mitigate collateral damage and death and suffering to civilians, which is sadly unavoidable. But the Israeli army has always done its best, to mitigate those types of casualties.
Mm-hmm. And what about after this ground offensive? There seems to be not an ideal scenario. Does Israel once again occupy Gaza? Do they leave the Palestinians to try to find a way? UN humanitarian agencies intervene. Is there a plan for after this ground offensive is over?
The plan after the offensive is the plan as before the offensive, as has been the plan since the establishment of Israel of 1948. That's to have peace. I would ask your viewers to go back and look at history. Before the State of Israel was created in 1948, the UN offered a partition plan to both the Arabs and the Jews living under the Palestinian Mandate, and that was to divide the land that was under the British Mandate into two states, an Arab state and a Jewish state, with a neutral Jerusalem and an economic cooperative. The World Zionist Organization, the Jewish organization at the time, agreed. The Arabs rejected it. The only reason that there's a problem in Gaza and there's a problem in the West Bank today has nothing to do with Israel. It has to do with the Arabs. It is their own choosing to live this way. We have made peace. We have constantly reached out the olive branch of peace to our enemies. We did it with Anwar Sadat in 1979, who had spilled Jewish blood. We did it with King Hussein in 2006, who had spilled blood. We've done it with other Arab countries in the Middle East, including Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates. But the one people who have refused to go down the path of peace, despite Prime Ministers Olmert and Ehud Barak and Ariel Sharon and Benjamin Netanyahu all doing their utmost best to find a peaceful solution, they've all rejected it. So the end game here is peace, but the Palestinian people are going to have to choose peace. And that means stopping not just the rhetoric, but the teaching of generation after generation of a desire to eliminate the Jewish people from, quote, Jerusalem to the sea. Until that mentality ends and that ideology is completely eradicated, it's going to be a very, very, very long and painful period for the Palestinian people.
Yeah, the ideology of hate, indeed. We just learned breaking news that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that he will allow aid to Gaza. This is promising news. This is good news for the innocent people. Is there a reason you think Prime Minister Netanyahu has decided to send aid to Gaza now, and this story is making headlines now?
Well, I think the answer to that is simple. Unlike the barbarians who murdered pregnant women and decapitated babies and burned people alive, the Jewish people in the state of Israel are human beings. We have a conscience. We do not want to see the suffering of innocent human beings. And so while we need to do everything possible, everything within our power to eliminate Hamas, eliminate radical Islam and the fundamentalists from Gaza, we don't want the Palestinian people, the innocent people, to suffer. And so I have no doubt that as a primary motivation, it's being humane. It's being a human being, something that unfortunately Hamas and other Islamic fundamentalists can't seem to wrap their hands around.
Yeah, and there was news that Iran is stepping in now, saying that there may be a glimmer of hope for the release of hostages. what do you make of Iran's statements? We haven't heard anything from Hamas confirming that, but the fact that Iran wants to somehow play a peace negotiator in the middle of all of this, does Iran have the power to release these hostages? And how serious should we take these comments by Iran?
Well, I think we have to understand that there are two groups, quite frankly, that help Hamas and to some degree control Hamas. The Iranians are certainly one of them. Hamas does not exist if it wasn't for the Iranians. So can the Iranians play a role in telling Hamas what to do? Absolutely. Their funding comes from Iran. Their weapons come from Iran. Their technology comes from Iran. So absolutely, the Iranians can, if they wanted to, have enormous influence on Hamas. The other, of course, is Qatar. Qatar hosts and harbors the leaders of these barbaric animals in Doha. Ismail Haniyeh and his henchmen all sit in Qatar. So we have to remember that Hamas doesn't act alone. Hamas doesn't act independently. They have backers. They have supporters. And those supporters can wield enormous influence on how they act.
George Birnbaum, thank you so much for joining us, former Chief of Staff to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. I look forward to speaking to you again very soon, and I just hope in better circumstances. Thank you.
You all pray for that. Thank you.